Hello everyone and welcome to another kit review video. Today got myself and Harry. We're here today to talk to you about the German Precision Optics GPO Rangeguide 2800 binoculars, which, as the name suggests, they are a pair of rangefinding binoculars. They retail for about 1,400 quid. They can range targets, unsurprisingly, out to 2,800 metres, reflective targets that is, slightly less for non-reflective targets. They weigh about 960-ish grams, I believe it is. Harry and I have been testing a pair of 10x50s and a pair of 8x50s for the last four weeks or so, and thought we'd give you our honest thoughts on them. So, Harry, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's quite important to sort of say where we're coming from optically, I suppose, with these, because otherwise, you know, there's nothing really to reference that against. I might say they're really good, but I could be coming from nothing at all. I use, usually for deer stalking, these absolutely ancient Zeiss BG-AT
Submarine Commander.
Literally, you know, bash someone to death with 8x56B binoculars, which are 1970 something, and they are massive, as you can see, and heavy, but they've got very, very good glass, and they seem to gather an awful lot of light. So I've been using these for a good couple of years and found that the glass actually is very good.
They're really good.
They are monstrously heavy and sort of cumbersome, and you can't really use them with one hand, but quite good sort of optic. People say, you know, they don't make them like this anymore, and I think that's probably true for stuff like that. Yeah. And I have to say that I was pleasantly surprised with them. I thought, you know, yeah, sorry, with the GPOs. One thing that I thought would be worse than it actually is the difference between the two tubes. As in, a lot of people find with perhaps some of the other range-finding binoculars at a similar price point that the tube that does the range-finding has a lot worse glass or sort of low light ability. It is, you can tell, I found.
You think?
I saw at very early morning, I could just about tell, but I'm talking like pretty slight. You know, you really are sort of looking for it. You wouldn't perhaps notice otherwise. Aside from that, optically, I thought the glass is absolutely fantastic for the money. If you look at what else is out there for the same money, you know, the glass in this is absolutely fantastic. It was,
I think it was the first trip out with them. We were stalking one morning, weren't we?
Yeah.
And neither of us had, I don't think either of us had used them yet.
No.
And we're both kind of, I don't know, scanning around with them and sort of like, yeah, seemed sort of fine. And it was only then when we went into some woodland, and we'd both been sort of scanning around for a minute or two, and we both looked at each other and were like, these are actually pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm not massively great on sort of optical terminology, but like the colour and the contrast in them is just something else.
Yeah, the coatings that they have on them to bring out more colours than others, I think they've got the balance of that really good. In woodland, it seems to really pop colours.
Yeah.
You know, the sort of ones that you want, like sort of browns and things for deers, you know, they really pop, and they just seem to be, you know, very, very clear. And obviously, I mean, this is an 8x50, that's a 10x50. I think we both found them to be pretty good in low light. You know, I don't use sort of top of the range Swarovski, you know, 8x50s or whatever, so I'm sure they might be better, but I found that these were more than adequate for, you know, sort of normal stalking at dawn and dusk.
It's interesting because maybe my eyesight's worse, well, it definitely is, or maybe there's a difference between the 8 and 10s, but I couldn't tell much of a difference between, well, I couldn't tell any difference between the two ocular lenses in terms of which one had the rangefinder in, which I come from having used a pair of Vortex 10x42s Diamondbacks, which I think I got for about 100 and something quid years and years ago. Absolutely fine, do the job, really good binoculars actually, in fairness, especially for the money. But not the best sort of optical quality, and the jump between the two is incredible, massive difference. And I have been looking at upgrading these for a while, and I've tried out various other range-finding binoculars, and I've always found that scenario that Harry's just described, that you pick them up, you look through them, and actually on the right hand one, which is normally the one with the rangefinder in, especially at last light or first light, you can tell, and the one on the right is just a bit fuzzier, a bit darker, a bit grainier, and you're like, for the money you pay, I think that's quite disappointing. Whereas with these, I couldn't see any difference between the two, which is really, really good.
Yeah. And I think part of it might even be the fact that if you're very early first light stalking and you're out there and you range something, part of me thinks that it might just be the fact that there's a bit of you're losing a bit of your sort of night sight in that eye.
Yeah, that's true.
Because you're popping up a bit of brightness, and you know that might account for a certain amount of it. But I could tell a little bit. But yeah, I think we're both pretty impressed with the glass.
Yeah. In terms of that brightness within the eye,
yeah.
So we should say it's an orange rangefinding, orangey red sort of rangefinding display in the right hand one. 9 different brightness settings. So if at first light you want it sort of quite low, you can switch it down, and if you want it high during the day, you can. And it's all done by 2 buttons on here, and I found it quite easy to use.
The menu was very intuitive. You change the first thing that comes up is the brightness, which is what you are changing, you know, most of the time. I think you probably need all of those brightness settings if you know, especially if you account for the fact that these will probably be used in, you know, all over the world, including like very bright environments and very dark places. So you need all of that. I like the fact that you can change. You know, you can take off things like temperature and angle and stuff like that. You don't have to necessarily have that on the display. You can just have the distance, which is what I was using it for.
Makes it a lot less cluttered, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the actual kind of range finding crosshair, or whatever you want to call it, isn't a crosshair. It isn't a solid lump. It's a sort of, it looks like a polo, like it's a sort of circle, but with the central bit missing, which I found quite nice, because when I was looking at some deer with it this weekend, if you're far enough away on something small, if it was a big solid dot, you could quite easily blank out the entire deer with it. Whereas the fact that it's hollow, you sort of hover it over the deer and you're like, yeah, I can still see the deer through that bit, so actually I know I'm still on.
Yeah,
it's really good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we both, I mean, in terms of the actual rangefinder itself, I don't have any particular complaints. I thought it was really good.
Yeah.
It seemed to do exactly what it said on the tin. I ranged things out to, you know, whatever the max was, 2,800 meters, and it seemed to do really well on your sort of classic, you know, I suppose what this would be most useful, 250 to 300 yards. It seemed to do very, very reliably. The sort of scanning feature where you can hold down the button and sort of scan the landscape and it changes, that's very good. I understand this is a very fast range finding binocular, so you know that updates very quickly, so you can sort of scan around and it very quickly tells you where it is. So yeah, I don't think I've got any particular complaints on that. I thought that the actual rangefinder itself was very, very good. In terms of sort of build quality and things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they seem to be very well made. I like the fact that you've got the eye cups that come up. I think that's probably pretty standard on obviously this price, but also the fact that you can, you know, change the focus on both eyes. I quite like the wheel is very good. You've got a very wide range of adjustment, which I think we thought was good and bad.
Yeah, it seemed quite fussy, perhaps is the wrong word, but you can, if you get them well focused on something and then you move to something else, whatever you've moved to will be completely out of focus. I mean, that not a quick swizzle of this and it gets it perfectly back in focus. But I do find I have to adjust these more than perhaps I was doing with my older, smaller, worse Vortex ones.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe that's the trade-off to get a better sight picture.
Yeah, quite easily.
Agree with all the build quality comments, and they seem to sort of come with quite a lot of nice bits and pieces as well, in terms of eye covers for the front, eye covers for the back, neck strap, sort of pouchy thing, instruction manual, all the sort of normal bits and pieces that you'd expect, really.
It smells are good.
I suppose the big question would be, if someone said to you, Harry, here's a pair, £1,400, would you snap? Would you take them?
I think I've got a slightly complicated and probably not very straightforward answer to this, but
We like complicated.
I mean, I think they are. I mean, they're ultimately they're a luxury. They are not, in my view, a necessity. I've taken them out stalking 5 or 6 times, and yeah, sometimes being able to range something is quite useful, but I can't say I actually use them to successfully range a deer and then shoot it, because the majority of the deer stalking anyone does in the UK is between 100 and 150 yards.
Yep.
And if you're shooting 308, 243, any of the most common calibers 6.5, and your normal zero is an inch above at 100 yards, you don't need to range find unless you're going up to sort of 300 yards, which how often do you really shoot that far? So for me, they're a bit of a luxury, and I think if I had if I had 1,400 quid and I was on a budget, I would much rather spend the money on perhaps a second-hand, very good quality pair of binoculars. These were quite good. These are very good actually. I think these were like 400 or 500 quid, and they're fantastic, glass-wise. But for the money, you could get a second-hand pair of Swarovskis, and probably a little handheld rangefinder if you wanted it. So I think if you're on a budget, I don't think so. But if you had the money to spend and you wanted a pair of rangefinder binoculars, I think these are very, very good. For the money, I cannot fault them. If you look at what else is on the market, they're very, very good. The glass is fantastic. The rangefinding is great. The build quality seems, we've only had them for a month, but it seems to be really good. So, if you wanted a pair of rangefinder binoculars, I think they're great. But it's more the concept of
whether you as a deer stalker need a pair of binoculars with a rangefinder in. And we were talking earlier, and I asked you the question: do you think part of that is because you're naturally good at ranging distances? So actually, even if you had, say, a rangefinder in your pocket, you'd probably only pull it out once a year.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've always loved the really flat shooting calibers. Particularly for that reason. If you shoot 243 or 2506, like I do, then you don't need to adjust or dial or anything out to about 300-ish yards, depending on what grains you're using. So, and I don't typically shoot deer any further than that, so I have never really needed one. Right. How about yourself?
I'm probably coming at it from a slightly different point of view. Firstly, in that I've got a pair of sort of what I would describe as budget entry-level binoculars, which I shouldn't put anyone off because they're very, very good. But at the same time, feel like I'm missing out in terms of optical clarity, particularly first and last light. So I was looking to upgrade. I shoot what is typically a loopier caliber, I suppose, a 308. Although I've sort of ironed that loopiness out with using lighter bullets. So have normally been more reliant on a rangefinder than probably you have, and perhaps I've got into the habit, and perhaps it's also made me worse at guesstimating ranges. So I do find I'm rangefinding things more often than perhaps I ought to be. So I was looking at, firstly, not only upgrading binoculars, and probably very fair what Harry said, that they are a sort of luxury item. I was thinking to myself, well, actually, if I'm upgrading these, do I slim down how much stuff I'm carrying in the field and get an upgraded pair of binoculars that have a rangefinder in them, so I don't have to carry 2 things, which isn't a problem, exactly as Harry said, it's a luxury, and these sort of fit the bill for me, so I probably would be tempted to buy a pair, because they just seem to be very, very well made, optical quality is brilliant, and they seem to do everything I would want them to do, and importantly for me, if I put them next to my sort of existing binoculars, in terms of size, there's not an awful lot in it, less than an inch in terms of height, next to nothing in terms of width, perhaps half an inch. Weight-wise, yes, there's a bit in it, but once it's in a binocular harness, I don't think you'd notice. So I probably will be tempted to take a pair of these home.
Yeah.
But very different sort of situations, and I would fully acknowledge that it's me doing it because I want to, rather than I feel like, as Harry said, in lowland England stalking conditions, I don't think you necessarily have to.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. And yeah, I mean, an important small bit of consumer advice is that the 8s are actually a bit bigger than the 10s, which is slightly strange, actually, isn't it?
I thought when we got them out the boxes we'd got them the wrong way around at first.
Yeah.
I mean you might not even be able to see it on the camera, but there's, I don't know, what, half a centimetre height difference.
Yeah.
In that the 8s are slightly taller.
Yeah.
Which is very strange.
Yeah. But they're not really much in comparison to these things, which don't fit in any binocular harness I've been able to find. So if anyone's got any, that's me.
The reason you need to change up. There you go.
Very
sold. So on that bombshell, everyone, thank you very much for joining us, and hope to see you on the next one.